First things first, though, let's get across a big day in Canberra now with my panel. From his front row seat in Canberra this afternoon, I'm joined now by the Daily Telegraph's political editor, Sky News host James Morrow, and from Sydney, radio broadcaster himself too, Sky News host Chris Smith. Gentlemen, welcome. James, to you first. First question time of the new parliament. How do you think the PM went?
Well, I'll tell you what, Pete, it wasn't a front row seat, it was a third row seat. The press gallery was so packed out today for everybody who wanted to come and see this first question time. It was really interesting because it was where the desire that Anthony Albanese has been articulating around, oh, we want to have a new politics, one that's kinder, gentler, more collective, more this, more that, more huggy, smacked up against the hard reality of a Westminster Parliament. And, in about half an hour, it just descended to the same sort of very robust, sort of shouty question time, you'd see in any parliament. But the really interesting thing to me was the absolutely artful way with which the PM just kept batting and refusing to answer any sort of question about the ABCC, about CFMEU thuggery, which everybody acknowledges pretty much, is out there. It's a documented problem, and he just simply refused to answer any question. He played a really dead bat on it, and the coalition, I think, got very frustrated with that, and I think, not unreasonably so. But it was quite interesting, too, because you saw the other thing, which I find fascinating about Parliament now, is that one side, they're all in their masks, and the other side, they're not. And even at one point, the Sports Minister, Annika Wells, shouted out, "Where's your mask? We believe in science," and stuff like this. So it became, even that's become contentious now.
It's interesting, that game with the unions and the dispatch box lines from Labor was very much the one that Julia Gillard played. Tony Abbott eventually got around her on that issue, but we'll see what happens here with Peter Dutton. He was pretty strong today, all guns blazing from the new opposition leader. Have a listen.
He's choosing to belittle the question that was put instead of playing games and getting frustrated.
All right, Chris, how did you rate Peter Dutton today?
Well, I brought the popcorn along. I wasn't in the Canberra gallery, but I still enjoyed it. It was good to see Parliament back in and Dutton giving as much as he got. I've got to say, though, while I thought the attack on the Building and Construction Commission was a good one, and Anthony Albanese was so hollow in his retort, like he kept talking about one particular case where one judge got stuck into the commission for a case that fell over. It was just very unconvincing, and I think this is a real weak spot for Anthony Albanese. But apart from that, you've got Peter Dutton kind of suffering for the sins of his predecessor, and this will go on because we're still in this, well, it began today, a parliamentary honeymoon, and so you've got to cop what comes to you. And they did bear the brunt of a lot of things on debt, a lot of talk about energy prices, etc., based on the grabs that you've already played in the program. I thought they copped a bashing, but Dutton did the best he could with what he could. And I think as we get months or maybe even 3 months down the track, he'll get a little bit more clear air and start to get a few shots in of his own and not just have to accept what the previous government failed at.
Look, I got into this wrong-headed move at the top of the show to ban the cashless debit card. It'll take 17,000 welfare recipients of all racial backgrounds off the scheme by the end of September. I made the point, James, this is very much like the card that Labor now wants to ban, like the card they used to have under Minister Jenny Macklin in the Gillard-Rudd years. A lot of the communities, these regional communities, Indigenous women in particular, they want this protection. The money coming from taxpayers, as I said before, reaches the kitchen table, goes in the belly of their kids, doesn't get spent down at the pub or put through the pokies. So if that's the case, why scrap it?
Well, I mean, I think the only thing you can say about PETA is that it's just scrapping it for the sake of scrapping something because it was the previous government's policy. And I think that's a real shame. As you say, Indigenous Australians want the same things that all other Australians want. They want, safety, security, their kids fed, and they want the opportunity to make something of themselves, own a home, start a business, have a job. And, protecting some of that money this way was all to the good. And I think that this is just listening to noisy activists rather than, the people on the ground, as you said, I think very rightfully in your editorial.
I'm going to put up on the screen a graphic. It's advice that came in May to the NT government. It comes from an Alice Springs Indigenous Women's Council. They met with the NT government ministers. They said, don't remove the bans on alcohol. I'll quote them, "We implore you to consider the vulnerable in these communities, in particular women and children, who are most at risk of further harm and abuse if the current restrictions are eased." You can't get a more clearer plea than that, Chris. Yet they've been lifted, and I went through the statistics. Already there's been a real spike in alcohol in the communities and violence.
Yeah, you can't get a better warning than that, and from the people who should know. Not only well before time, but from the people who should know. And it looks like as if the Northern Territory government is on its Pat Malone here, because you've got Marcia Langton and others outside of the Northern Territory saying, hey, don't drop these restrictions on alcohol. You've got the local elders saying the same thing 2 weeks before it was due to expire. And then you've got even Linda Burney saying, hang on, I've got to get a report on this. She's even worried. Or she needs to get her act together because these are John Howard's old emergency measures and they have to go back in before families and children suffer.
All right, just a quick comment from both of you. Murmurings inside the New South Wales government, talk of leadership changes, potentially, perhaps a move by Matt Keane. This comes back to the John Barilaro saga. And it goes to comments you heard last night from Andrew Clennell about advice or a memo going into the Premier's office and Stuart Ayres, the Minister's office, about the appointment of a public servant to the role. This advice apparently went through last year. Both men get up in the parliament and say they don't know anything about a public servant being the preferred candidate. We find out, though, the document might have gone into the Premier's office. We don't know if he saw it. He certainly didn't sign it. But Stuart Ayres did. Stuart Ayres signed it, which says he read it. It's gone back down to the public service. That's at odds with his statements in the House in the New South Wales Parliament. To you first, James, and then you, Chris. That gets pretty sticky for Stuart Ayres, doesn't it?
It gets very sticky, Peta, for Stuart Ayres, and but I think that it's still very sticky, even if Dom Perrottet didn't see this piece of paper himself, because frankly, people outside the political sphere are going to tar him with the whole brush of this whole very messy affair. And I think a lot of people are saying right now, the Labor government in New South Wales feels a lot like the end days of Labor back when they were in power.
Chris?
The Liberal Party's dead in New South Wales. The opposition has a fantastic leader. They've seen him in opposition. They want to put him as Premier. And the Liberal Party itself, there's such a chasm between what they think the party should be and who should lead it, like Matt Keane, and what the members think. They don't. It's a massive chasm. They're gone. 12 years up next March.
All right, now, just for me, thank you, gentlemen, thank you. Just from me to my viewers, I wouldn't mark down any politician for having a bit of paper in their office from the public servants. They throw it at you every single day. I'd mark them down, though, like Stuart Ayres, when they read it and they sign it and they send it back. But we'll see what happens.